Welcome to the Speed and Agility Summit. And I am happy to be back. I'm your host, Coach Bricks. And it is fantastic to be here to be able to speak to another very person I really respect highly. I've heard him speak a few years ago at a conference, and we've hooked up since. We've passed information along, back and forth. We talk all the time about different things. So, I mean, that's what this profession's all about. And, it's just great to have somebody on here who loves doing what he does. If you hear him speak or you see him in person, that guy's just motivated right there just to be doing what he does. And that's what this profession is. And he's going to get more into it. He's going to get into his background and all that kind of stuff. Talk about, how he started up and all that. But, without further ado, man, I'm very honored. Coach EricMitchell. Eric, how are you tonight, bud?
I'm doing well, Coach. It's an honor for me to be on here. I truly appreciate it.
No, man, it's my pleasure. And this is going to be out there to educate as many up-and-coming sports coaches, strength coaches out there that we possibly can, and give a little bit of your system, your concept of what you do and how you got involved in all that kind of stuff. So if you're ready, Coach, I'm ready. Let's get rocking and rolling, man.
Ready, fire away.
All right, buddy. Hey, I know, about you. I've done research on you and stuff like that, once we got to meet and where you come from. But I want you to just give, a background of, how you got in this profession, why you got into it, so young coaches out there who are looking maybe possibly getting in, might get inspired by something that you say here.
Sure. I mean, gosh, the journey, it started about 20 years ago. And I was originally a track coach coming out of college. I coached at Upper Darby High School, high school right outside of Philadelphia. And I was also involved in personal training, was very blessed with the people that I was involved with. In fact, one of my mentors is now the head football strength coach for Michigan, a gentleman named Kevin Tolbert. And learned a lot from him, but we were in a Nautilus setting, so it was, as you know, Dave, you're aware of that, super slow to failure, one set of 8 exercises for 5 straight years. That's what I worked on. And my issue became that I wasn't challenged enough in the adult sector in personal training, and I decided that I wanted to get involved in sports performance. And back when I did it, starting about 96, there really wasn't any sports performance. And I made a decision, you're going to love this, that I was going to be the sports editor of the Inquirer, a gentleman named Art Carey. He focused on a lot of the health and fitness. And I said, you want to write a story about my company? And he said back then, this was probably about February of 97, he said, I have no interest in that whatsoever. There's just no market for that. Nobody cares about being fast. You're born fast, and that's it. You can't get any faster. Well, about a month later, at the tail end of February, the NFL Combine was first broadcast on ESPN. And I got a phone call from Art Carey saying to me, I want to write a story about your company. And I was literally in my Chevy Blazer driving, equipment in the back. And he said, I need to meet you at Haverford College, a small school outside of Philadelphia, to do this interview. Can you meet me in 45 minutes? And I said, yeah, sure. Hung up the phone. And I thought to myself, boy, I don't even have a company. And I made one up on the way to the interview. I called it Progressive Speed Training. He did the interview. The paper came out the next day. And within 72 hours, I had 48 phone calls for people asking, how are you going to get my kid faster? And mind you, they were calling on, I had to give a home phone number. So I was getting it on an answering machine. I'd have to come back, erase it. Then more people would call. And that's how my journey started, and was very blessed, got involved with tennis pros. And at certain points during the late 90s and the early 2000s, I was working with some of the top tennis players in the country. A football agent contacted me, and I started working with NFL Combine guys. And to be honest with you, Dave, there weren't certifications yet. Nobody did these kinds of things. So I got my CSCS through the NSCA, went out to their speed and agility clinic out of Springs, and learned some different things, and was able to go through these programs and coach these high-level athletes. But something was missing, and I wanted to work more with kids. Well, in about early 2004, Bill Parisi out of North Jersey contacted me after an article that was about my company in the Philadelphia Magazine, and he was talking about that he was going to start franchising. And I just thought, it made the most sense for me to go to an established program that was established really well in North Jersey and become a part of that. And early 2005, I got some business partners together who I'm very happy to say I have now bought them all out in the subsequent years. But in 2005, we were the third franchise to come on board with Parisi Speed Schools. And it is devoted to working with youth athletes. And it's the coaching that interested me more than anything else. Not so much the science. Science is terrific, but the coaching element was the most important part. And then about 8 years into that, I discovered Training for Warriors through Martin Rooney, who's a part of the Parisi Network. And we also brought on Training for Warriors, and it came full circle. Now I'm also working with adults again in a system of training that is very similar to the Parisi model, where it's about coaching. And, you know, that's what you and I have talked about when we would get together at the clinics that we've been together at, that's the lost art. That's the lost element, is the coaching aspect of things. And that's really where I came from. And I'm so excited to be able to talk about this further with you. I think as coaches, we have to serve the kids and the people coming into our industry to understand what coaching is really about.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get more into that coaching part of it, because I think, you know, you and I have talked about it. I think there's a difference between trainers and coaches. Yes. And, you know, I think that's where a lot of people get mistaken when they come up and go, I want to be a trainer. And, you know, they talk to me about that. And I said, you got to look at what you really want to be. That's fine. If you want to be a trainer, that's fine. There's certain people that are just trainers. But I said, you really want to be a coach that impacts lives. And you and I have talked about that many times. Why don't you get into, like, what your concept is behind a trainer? What would you describe as a coach? Who would you describe, you know, your background, your description of a coach would be?
Sure. Well, I think a coach, there's an old saying that I use a lot when I go out and I do certifications for Parisi, and that's that trainers have a tendency to count a lot of numbers, and coaches are impacting lives. And so for me, the concept of coaching is that you're diving a little bit deeper than just, you know, developing the exercises. You're going so much further with the development of the athlete that you're working with, where you're diving in personality type they have. You're diving into, you know, what happened during their day, what is affecting them, how is it affecting them, diving deeper into the mental aspect of training as well, so that a coach brings out the greatest, I feel, in an athlete. And you and I have both shared, we've had some tremendous coaches. We've had some tremendous coaches that have impacted the way that we do things. And I'll tell you what, for me, it's been about the life experience that coach brought to the table that has developed my sense of coaching more than anything else. So it goes far beyond just, you know, exercise design. While important, I'm never going to credit the fact that science is critical in our field, but the art of coaching. How do you communicate? What is it you're communicating, and how do you succinctly do it for athletes as young as 7 years old, all the way to the professional athletes who some people think, hey, you know, look, they don't need coaching because they're already so talented. They don't really need that aspect. They just need the training part. But you and I both have experienced it. They're the ones that need the coaching the most. So coaching to me is an art form where you are diving deep into what is the makeup of that athlete. What are their needs? So communication's key. If a young coach can't communicate, they won't last long in our industry. They will end up just counting numbers, which unfortunately is problematic, I feel, in a lot of the big box gyms, and that to me doesn't equate to coaching and impacting lives.
You know, and I 100% agree. I think, you know, a coach is different. A good coach is definitely different than, you know, somebody, as most people consider trainers. You know, somebody out there who are impacting lives, and I think that's, you know, why you got into it. I can definitely feel whenever I hear you speak. I mean, anybody I talk to who's sitting in the audience with me and stuff like that says that guy got that passion. And I think that's what sometimes misses in this field, you know, for young strength coaches coming up, or even sports coaches out there. You know, you guys have an opportunity as well to really impact lives. And I think that's one of the things that we have to do is get these kids right, but also understand where they're coming from. Because everybody I've ever dealt with, I know you probably dealt with the same, is different. Different, and you got to be able to know how to read somebody. If you can't read a person, I don't think, you know, this profession is definitely for that individual, because I think that's very, very important to be able to read that individual and see where they come from. Would you not agree?
Well, yeah, I agree, and I think it's okay if they're not. If a young coach comes into it and realizes that it's not for them, but it really has to be about, you know, like you said, like getting into this industry and realizing the kids that you're dealing with and realizing the athletes that you are going to be across a lot of psychological spectrums. They're going to be coming from a lot of socioeconomic backgrounds that are very different. And I would say this to young coaches, if you discover that it's not the field for you, go find where your passion is. But as you and I have talked about many times, and I know you're just as passionate as about what we do, is that, you have to dive deep into what the psyche of the athlete themselves. And if you can accomplish that, if you can communicate, I'll say this. I've had kids that have come in, and I say kids, I'm talking about college graduates who come in for job interviews, and they have all the certifications and they've got all the extra science degrees, but you watch them in action, and you'll know very quickly if a coach can communicate with anybody. Hey, listen, even we have a special needs program that we work with, and there's a certain type of way that you have to deal with those young athletes as well. And it's a circumstance. I like to put my coaches and say, you're going to try to teach this class. I want to see how they respond to that, because I think it's important. Young kids, and then, like I said, in this special needs population that we have, when you'll know you have a great coach if they can respond to kind of any situation that pops up.
Yeah, and I agree. Now, getting into somebody, how would you say somebody coming out? There's some people that are more shy, some people like that, more outgoing. How would you talk to somebody, say, to reach out? How be able to read somebody? What would be some of your points saying, hey, this is how you got to read this individual, that individual, and stuff like that? You've trained many great coaches, guys underneath you that have gone on, done some great things. How would you do that for an individual?
Well, we actually go through a process where it's when we interview them, there's a lot of questions that we ask, and we talk about their background. And for instance, we'll talk about like what's their moral code. What intrinsically, what do they really believe is the right thing to do in certain circumstances? So we'll even ask them questions about, we'll say like, here's a situation that happens at work. You see somebody take something that's not theirs. How would you respond? We ask that question to find out where they are. And I've had coaches actually, they'll answer that question very honestly. They'd be like, I wouldn't do anything. I would ignore it. It's none of my business. I've heard people say that. I've heard some people say that I would immediately contact my supervisor, or I would confront that person and talk to them. We talk about scenarios in coaching and say you have a young athlete who's gone through an injury, and they have a parent who's really coming down on them about getting back on the field. How would you handle that? And we dive deeper into not just their knowledge, and I think that's what happens, Dave, is that they come into this thinking that all we're going to be asking about is program design. Okay, well, if you have this scenario and you have to set this workout up, how would you do that? That's the last thing on my mind when talking to young coaches. I want to know who they are. I want to know how they're going to respond to young kids in my program, because let's be clear, those are the kids. That's who they're addressing. I want to know if they can respond to different levels of skill and ability, and how they respond to me. We categorize it in these different trophy levels, almost like the Olympics. You have your gold, your silver, and your bronze. That's not saying that a kid who scores, a young coach comes out and scores bronze level, couldn't grow into the business, couldn't grow into being better. I also have to know this. I have to know their ability to sell themselves to anybody, because essentially, and you know this, our industry is based on how well do you passionately sell the program that you are going to be teaching. And if you can sell yourself, if you can give the person the knowledge that your passion is belief in the system that you're coaching, then to me, a coach like that stands to be better molded into a great coach. Not every coach is going to come out, to be honest with you, Dave, and jump right out like you and I have done, jump right out and be able to coach right away. But we sometimes forget that we've been in the business a long time. I mean, I remember just coming into this, I was shy. I had a tough time getting into that coaching mode until I decided, hey, look, I'm going to act as if until I don't even need to act as if I'm going to be like this all the time. And that's how you do it. Presenting's key. Watching how a coach, I have coaches actually they study a little bit about our program, and then they present an orientation to the other coaches. And it really gives them you got to speak. You got to be able to communicate. And right there, I think that's an important stage. And I would encourage any young coach to prep themselves before they even get out of school and take public speaking courses and get out and speak. That's my method. And I found it to be very, very successful.
I think you're right. I think, that's lost art being able to communicate. I think we've come into today. We've talked about today's age of the social media, the text messaging, and things like that. And I think some people have forgot how to communicate on a personal level with each other. You know what I mean? We're so quick and so short that I think that's lost. And I think, you guys doing it that way is great advice. Great advice. That's $1 million right there for any young strength coach, any sports coach right there. That's the best advice you can take. Learn how to communicate with each other. Because I think if we did, we could stop a lot of problems that we have, in this profession, in this world, really, if we just learn how to communicate a little better and be able to understand where that other person's coming from instead of just jumping all down. So I think that advice right there is worth everything right there. I think that's amazing. Now, I want to get a little more into your system. You know what I mean? I don't like to call it philosophy, and some people do. I'm not a philosopher by any stretch of the imagination. I think I think there's training systems. I really think there's training systems, training concepts that each individual has, and I think you and I, do that well. Your system's a little different than mine, but we come to the same, understanding of what we're trying to get out of it. What is the system that you follow? And I know you follow, the Parisi and stuff, but it has to be a little flair that Coach Mitchell adds in there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've mixed a lot of what Parisi and Training for Warriors has done. From this perspective, we split our linear speed days into acceleration and top speed, which I want to get into really quickly. I'm a big proponent of top speed mechanics, getting people to understand how to run at maximal speed. I think a lot of coaches are afraid to teach that. You rarely see it. Yeah, this is the thing I get. I don't know if you do, Dave. I get a lot of people that will say, like, well, my kids are never in top speed, so why would I teach top speed? But then you're not teaching linear speed.
Yeah.
Because they are going to get at top speed, and you have to understand the mechanics behind top speed. Acceleration, top speed. We also go with change of direction, and it's getting kids, and to be honest with their parents, getting them to understand that that's not necessarily agility. Agility is a component within change of direction, but change of direction, the ability to accelerate, decelerate, stop, and change direction in any direction while maintaining balance and power throughout those motions, and really diving deep into where an athlete's position of power is. I would say that's one of the things that I really focus on is position of power, because if an athlete understands and an athlete knows where their body is supposed to be on the field of play or the court or the track or the weight room, if they know where their body is supposed to be, and it's coming from here more than anything else, if their body knows where to be, they will less likely be injured. I never say injury prevention. I cringe when I hear that because they're going to get hurt at some points. It's less than the likelihood of getting injured. So we focus on those things, but I'm a big believer in this too. And interestingly enough, Dave, I've come full circle with this. When I first broke in to this industry, I thought it was the speed and agility development. I wasn't educated enough to really look at the fact that relative body strength was clearly the most important thing. It took me a while to evolve to that. I would actually defer strength training to other people because I would say, like, my specialty, speed, agility, and change of direction. And then all of a sudden, in doing my due diligence and my research, because, look, if we ever say that we know everything, we're out of our minds, because that's not the case. I really learned, number one is strength training. So to be strong, intrinsically strong, is going to be really important for an athlete to develop speed, to develop the ability to change direction. And so strength training has become even more targeted for us in the Parisi model and the Training for Warriors model as well. But I add something else to this. My flair, and I'll say this, is I really get deep down into the art of getting these kids to understand belief. So I do story time with every class. It started out with my elite players, all my NFL Combine guys and my high school football players. But then even the youngest kids were like, hey, Coach Eric, how come we don't do story time? And story time is telling stories that relate directly to belief, self-confidence, all those different things, perseverance, self-discipline, all those different things. And this is what it's done. It's permeated the culture of my community. So when I have parents saying that the topic of discussion at the dinner table, and that's a lost art, parents that I haven't heard this in so many years, because I remember as a kid, and I'm sure you do, you ate dinner with your parents. There was no phone calls. There was no interruption. You talked about your day. When I hear parents nowadays saying the topic of conversation at dinner is what I learned today at Parisi, You know what's interesting, Dave? They don't talk about the acceleration. They don't talk about the linear speed. They don't talk about the strength, although those are important components. The kids want to tell their parents, you know what? I learned to believe in myself because I learned how to do this, this, and this physically. And I heard this story about this athlete. And you can tell I'm passionate about this. And that's the flair, the nuance that I've always brought to the table, and felt that was what was always missing. Is you have this sterile environment where you're just, you're spitting out information about direction change and wall drives and leg drills and speed skaters. But when you come down to it, and you explain to those kids, hey, look, here's why you're doing it, and here's an example of somebody who did it. And then they look at it and they're like, wow, I heard of that guy. I know who that is. And with the Olympics that just went by, and to see what on there, we saw the greatest examples of sportsmanship, and we saw the worst examples of it in this Olympics. And to me, that's my philosophy, is that you're bringing a holistic approach to training and getting really deep into not only the science, because you know what ends up happening? They don't remember that. They learn it, and they intake it, and they use it, but they remember the impact behind what you taught them in that session. And that's, I'd say that if you're asking me what's the nuance, what's the difference, to me that's the difference. That's what I brought to the table.
And that's fantastic. I think that needs to be done more by more coaches, giving them examples, but also having them belief. I think we sometimes just think, well, these athletes, a lot of ones that we work with are just great. So they have all the confidence in the world. When you really look deep down, when you really, dive in there, there's not many that have that confidence. You know what I mean? They really lack it. Yeah, they might be great athletes and they do well on the field or whatever they're participating in, but they really lack that. And I think that's something that young coaches really need to understand. That's what you need. That's how you impact somebody. You know what I mean? That story time that you have, that's an impactful thing. And I remember my great coaches that I always can remember that are great coaches, sports coaches, always had some type of story to build you up. You know what I mean? They might correct you and stuff like that, come down on you a little bit during practice and stuff, but they always had something, hey, I want to build you back up now with this kind of story. And I think that's what we need to do. Get people going in the right direction. So I really like that. Now I want to turn back just a little bit here. Go back to your linear and lateral days. You talked about there. How do you break that up? Somebody comes in and they're going to watch, a Parisi workout for a whole week. They're going to spend time with Coach Mitchell for a whole week. What are they going to see during that week? Say an athlete, comes in. I don't know how you got set up 2 times a week, 3 times a week. I guess they can choose. But how would you set that up?
Well, ideally, we know this in an ideal world, you'd want these athletes to come in 4 days a week. Honestly, I'd love to have them every day, but that's not the reality of it. So if an athlete generally comes in 2 to 3 times a week, if it's an athlete that's going to come in twice a week, what happens with our program is that, like I said, since it's a linear day, if it's a linear day, you've got choices of acceleration and top speed. We give the kids the ability to choose through online scheduling what day they're going to choose. Now, we also track that, Dave, so they can't just come to say, well, I'm only going to do an acceleration day. They have no choice. We prescribe within a certain amount of sessions what classes they're going to take based on their evaluation and their strengths and weaknesses, and we work from there. So, for instance, what we'll do is we break our workouts up into 4 quarters. They start off with a warm-up, which sets the tone. If the warm-up isn't there and the warm-up isn't specifically designed for, say, an acceleration day or a top speed day, and there are little nuances in the warm-up for those days, then they're going to dive into the mechanical anchoring drills. For instance, for acceleration, they're going to work on a wall drive. And that's giving kids the ability to understand where the body is supposed to be. 45-degree angle. Now, on a wall drive, you can't work with opposite arm, opposite leg relationship, or they'll break their jaw against the wall. But you give them an idea that if we were to take our arms off, this drill would be used for acceleration. Hips are going to be forward and up, and they're going to have a positive shin angle. We give them those things, and be honest with you, by the end of a session, every single athlete in our program is going to know where their body is supposed to be, and they can verbatim spit out where their head is supposed to be, where their shoulders are, where their hips are. They know those. After the mechanical anchoring drill, and we say this at every single session, they have to work on it. And I'll say this, with the mechanical anchoring drill, the technique, they must create rituals to those techniques so that those athletes, when they come in, every single time they set they set up the wall drive, it has to be set up the same way. And I'll tell you this, I've been doing this for a long time, and until my knee heals, which is everybody out there, I just had a total knee replacement, and I'm way ahead of schedule, so I'll be back sprinting in no time soon. But I'll do it. So every time I get up against the wall or the railing, I'm setting the stage for my body to be in the right position when I go to the next step, which is the applications. So the applications can be a number of things. We have an online program that we use. It's an athlete management system. It gives coaches the ability to go through a lot of videos that have been produced by the Parisi system. I'm actually on that educational board, so we produce these different drills that are, if you look at it, Dave, you'd look at it and be like, I've seen a lot of these drills, and there's some drills I haven't seen, and the great thing is we have all the video instruction as well for the coaches, so they can look at it and they can formulate their training session. And they can really pull down and say, in an application, they're going to do falling starts, they're going to do push-up starts, they're going to do med ball starts. It gives a coach the ability to do that. They're going to work on first step acceleration for 10 yards, whatever that might be. It might be time 10s, might be time 15s. After that, the application, which lasts about 20 to 25 minutes, then they're going to go into their cool down phase, and then they're going to go into their, whether it be core or a challenge phase, where the kids some time to have some fun. Now, on a top speed day, everything changes. So now you have a whole menu of exercises that they're going to do that are very different from the ADW all the way through to the cool down, so that the athlete has that ability to experience new things every single time they step into the door. However, the foundation's there. So every time they're going to come in, they're going to understand, if we say that we're going to do a leg drive drill, they do know what that is. And what they'll start to notice is neuromuscularly, they're going to get more in tune. They're going to get faster as a result of that. And it's just reinforcement. And I think that's the problem, is that we're in an industry that is so wrapped up, and I know you know this, and I know it frustrates you too. It is so wrapped up in it's just this beat down of these kids, and this, we beat them until they can't run, and we've got coaches that are saying, like, if the kid's not bleeding, he's not working. And it frustrates me to no end. And then I have parents come back when they come through our sessions, and my kid's not dead. He's not, he doesn't look like I want it where he's not walking. And then it's the education of the parents saying, look, guys, that's not my job. My job's to make them better at what they're trying to accomplish. And by technique training, we do that. Now, that's not to say they don't work hard, because once they understand it, the applications get tougher and tougher, because the kids can handle more. But boy, when we split up our programming, we make sure that the kids are really dialed into what is being taught that day. Now, like I said, then another day that they're going to come in, it might be 24 to 48 hours later, they're going to come in for a change of direction day. The warm-up completely changes. The mechanical anchoring drill is basically doing progressions and regressions of the speed skater and how to jump and land. Once they learn how to do that, then we start talking about the, quote, glamorous stuff, where athletes are using hurdles, and they're using cones, and they're using ladders to use direction change. But I'll say this. When you come into my speed school, and I know it's the same as your speed school, they're not doing something for nothing. They're learning a skill set that tracks back to everything that they learned in the session prior to it. So our 2 days, say if they come in 2 days, I'm going to probably steer them towards, if we're talking about speed and they already have a good strength base at their programs at school, which we can get into in a second as well, I'm going to steer them towards a linear day and a direction change day. If I can get them into a strength program as well, that's terrific. I love to monitor what their strength programs are in school. Some are great, some are horrific. And then we can start talking about, okay, well, when do we program strength into this program? Young kids can strength train. So I always encourage our Jumpstart athletes and their parents as well that, we have the statistics that kids can start training, proper resistance training as young as, hey, look, my son's 6. My son already can deadlift 1.5 times his body weight because he knows how to do it, because he's been training like that since he was about 3 years old. And so our system's interesting because our high school athletes, the one main thing that they'll always say is, well, I already do my strength training at school. And then, you know, Dave, you've seen this. You review what they're doing. You're like, oh, man. Whew, okay. how do we discuss this? And then my big thing is we will always offer a free demo for the strength and conditioning in high schools and say, look, we'd love to come in and at least do your warm up and help you guys, because some will listen, some will come out and say, yeah, come out. Others, they won't. But I did my job by going out and explaining that. So in that week's time that the kids are coming into our program, to get back to that, it depends on what the program is that they desire. But I will say this, at a base, they're gonna really work on linear speed and change of direction under a prescription that we work with for about 20 of those sessions. So pretty interesting.
Wow, and that's excellent. That you broke that down for us and stuff like that, because I know everybody's different. Every coach out there has like we said, a different concept and stuff like that. But you really hit home something that I'd really like you to go a little more in depth in, and that is foundation, fundamentals. I really believe that they are lost in today's society. We're so quick, and I call it, and I've said it in some of my speeches there, it's a YouTube certification generation.
I heard you say it in June.
Yeah, everybody goes on YouTube, and now all of a sudden they should do these exercises, or sees the like you said, the next crazy thing, when they had never learned the foundation of how, like you said, proper body position for power output. Can you get a little bit more in depth into that foundational pattern, that you guys utilize? Because I know you do a great job of it. So young coaches out there can understand how important the fundamentals are.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about strength, and if we're looking at strength, I mean, it's the four corners of the human movement patterns. I mean, the hinge for the deadlift, the squat, the bench, and in my opinion, the chin up or the pull up. Getting the coaches need to understand, like, if an athlete can't perform a pull-up, if an athlete can't perform a push-up, if an athlete can't squat, and then with the eventuality is that they can't hinge for a deadlift, those movement patterns, if you look at all those movement patterns, those are the things we do in sport. All the things that we do, those pushing motions, those pulling motions, if they don't learn the fundamentals of those things, and instead they dive into all these different aspects of training, they go through this entire litany of things, and they never work on the fundamental foundations. That's what we do. Our strength training day, there's a day that is devoted strictly to the hinge. Now here's where we're a total body session that has emphasis on one of the core movement patterns. So even in the hinge day, they're going to do something where at the end they're going to be doing some chin-ups and things like that. They're going to do bilateral motions as well. They're going to train both sides of their body. But if an athlete can't learn to do that pattern, that deadlift, and I am a huge proponent of the deadlift. That old adage where I love it when people say, well, I can't deadlift because I hurt my back. Well, I mean, your back's hurt because you didn't properly train. And a strong back is a healthy back. So I'm a big believer in that. But but you've seen this, and I'm baffled, man. When I watch kids squat, I'm just like, with their body weight, they don't squat. I don't even know what it is that they're doing. So we teach that fundamental foundation. And if I have one more kid that comes to me and says, well, all I want to find out is my max bench, and then you watch them execute a push-up, and they don't do it. So our strength program is really, really foundationally built around those movement patterns to get athletes to understand that. But here's the other thing, too. They don't learn those movement patterns, they're not running fast. They don't learn those movement patterns, they will not stop and stabilize properly. They will not land properly, and they're going to get hurt. So, to me, the understanding and strength, even if it's a basic knowledge, getting them to understand those movement patterns is really, really critical. If the first exercise in our warm-up is called a power squat, it's for them to understand how to squat properly with their body weight, then you can see how I'm a big believer in the foundation of movement. Just like if you ask me in a speed class, what's the most important aspect of the training session, it's the mechanical anchoring drills. Whether it be the wall drive, the claw, or whether it be the speed skater or vertical broad jumps and side jumps in the landings. So to me, foundation, if you're young coaches out there, don't worry about the newest fad. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Don't worry about what you see on TV on ESPN during those big games they have. That's not what you're teaching. Don't be teaching muscle ups and kippings if these kids can't even pull their own body weight up from a straight bar chin up. And that's my philosophy, foundational training. And I know you and I are exactly on the same page.
Yeah, I think the foundation and the fundamentals are so misinterpreted nowadays and just not done correctly. And I think, I'm glad to hear that, you guys do that and you guys hammer that stuff home. I mean, I saw your warm up that you did, up at the clinic and stuff, and you hammer that stuff. You hammer it. I mean, I'm all my kids all the time. I know they get bored and stuff like that sometimes. All right, I got to always do my arms and all this kind of stuff and get in this position. I'm like, yes, you got to do it over and over and over again till it's perfect, or at least progressing each and every time you do it. You know what I mean? The parachutes and all that stuff are great. There's a place for that stuff, the hurdles and all that stuff. But I think, going over those foundations, the fundamentals and the foundations are just so, so important. So I'm glad, to hear other coaches out there really hammering that home.
Sure.
Coach, the thing, what's one thing out there that you can give to a coach, a young coach out there, when it comes to speed? Now I'm talking just about speed, not overall, the performance aspect, that they should really learn. Something that they learn. We can go past the fundamentals. We're past the fundamentals now. They got that down. What else should they really understand when it comes to speed, to help their athletes or their team become better?
Well, I mean, if it's going to keep going back to this, I firmly believe in this. If we're talking about speed itself, the number one thing I always tell young coaches is that if you've got an athlete who could be better and faster, the bottom line is that the stronger an athlete is, the more mobile an athlete is, the faster they're going to be. So I don't want them to think that there's some magic thing that an athlete can do to become faster. I always say this: look at Olympic sprinters. I tell the coach this: look at them. What do you see? They're jacked. They're incredibly strong relative to their height and weight. So I'll say this, Dave, if this is not the direction that you wanted to take that question, I tell them, develop their strength and you will see an improvement in speed. Tell them also to learn how to relax and learn how to channel their energy mentally to make themselves faster. I've seen it time and time again, where I've got some sprinters who they've gotten to the point now, they're right on the edge, and the defining factor was that if they were really strong, that they are going to be faster. And I would say that is the number one determining factor for speed. Number one determining factor is that make an athlete strong and they're going to be faster. I don't care if they're an Olympic sprinter or they're a 320-pound offensive lineman. You make them stronger, they're going to get faster. And for young coaches out there, really start to think about that how you put that into your programming, how you develop strength is going to be the number one determining factor for speed. There's no question about it. No question.
Yeah, I agree. I think strength is the most important thing to increase the speed, the force output when you're stepping in, we're pushing to the ground, stuff like that. And I think it's sometimes overlooked. Everybody wants to do speed training, but they forget really what the basis the whole thing is. You know what I mean? Relative to the body and all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad you brought that up. I want to get into this part because I think this is where I think the industry's heading. This is just my opinion. And I wanted to get your opinion on it because I really think it's important. The rest and recovery. When we go to seminars and stuff, more and more coaches are starting to talk about it. You're starting to see the word, on the street. Hey, this is what we need to do. What is your concept on the rest and recovery portion of an athlete? What do you expect on their off days and stuff when they're not with you? Because they can't always be there. What do you expect with them to do to continue to enhance their their progress and get them ready for the next session?
Sure. Rest and recovery is a big deal even for us as coaches. The old theory, getting 8 hours of sleep, and when we have a nation that's perpetually sleep deprived, and when you have over 80% of the population that's getting 5 hours of sleep a night, and I won't even get into it. I know some of the scary numbers because and this is only a personal thing that I did with my elite high school athletes. I will tell you this, Dave, 100% of them, 100% are sleep deprived. And I mean, these kids are up till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning studying, getting up they might have a practice at 6 a.m. So, it's a tough balance to get them to understand rest and recovery. You have a generation of parents who are so driven by performance that they don't want their kids resting. and they think that any idle time is wasted time. And I've got athletes who never take a break, ever. And then you realize that's when they get injured. If an athlete's not with me and they don't have a competition or a practice, I will tell you that, I mean, if they want to do something that's called active rest, where they're going out and maybe taking a walk or a bike ride or doing something with foam rolling, we have a generation of kids that don't rest and they don't recover. If I say rest. I mean, you got to sleep, you got to rebuild your body, you got to get your energy back. So when they're not with us, I'm encouraging them to take some time off. And I mean, it's almost bordering on child abuse when you see these parents that say, you know, my daughter has 8 games on Saturday and Sunday. She's going to play 8 games, and then she's going to be back. She's got Parisi on Monday and Wednesday and Saturday the next week, and she's got field hockey practice on Tuesday and like the other days. And I'm at the point now in my career where I'll tell parents, I'll tell them what I think, that an athlete's got to rest and they got to recover. So if they're not with us, and we say rest, we mean it. Rest and recover. And that's even to say, like, between heavy workouts. You know, I've got kids, I'm amazed. I have kids in programs where, at high school, where they're squatting one day and then the very next day they're back heavy deadlifting. And I don't know. I don't quite understand the mentality of the coaches in that department. Getting these kids to be healthier is having them step back and take a rest. And but my philosophy is that rest is rest and recover is recovering, and you got to keep track of it as well and make sure that they get sleep, because they're not recovering.
Yeah, you know, I agree. I think, you know, we become a society, we think if we take this much, we do this much, it's going to be great. If we do, you know, then if it's that great, then we take more and do more, then it's going to even be better. And I think we've gotten into that, you know, that area that it just like I said, I think it's become more and more prevalent over the last 2 to 3 years, where I've heard more and more people speak on it. And the more research that I do, I agree. I think we just don't rest enough. You know what I mean? Overall, we're like you said, we're sleep deprived, but we're also, you know, our muscles are so fatigued out. And I think that's what's leading to a lot of these, you know, injuries that didn't really happen much when you and I were, you know, growing, or at least to the extent of them. You know, the number, and I know more kids are participating now, but still the number of kids that are getting hurt left and right with this injury and that injury. And I'm like, you just played 8 games on Saturday. You played 3 more on Sunday. You had a 3-hour practice on Monday, Tuesday. What do you expect? I mean, and you know, I think we got it. And I think that's one of the biggest educations that sports coaches need, and young coaches who are coming into this profession really need as well. So that's great advice. Great advice. You know, one more thing here, Coach.
Sure.
You know, I think, you know, you hit on it a little bit. I just want to know if you go into a little bit more. You talked about your story time, where, you know, you impacted those athletes. Something that you do besides story time, where you motivate athletes or a team. What do you do to really get them fired up? You know, they're getting ready. You might be there before a game, and you need to get them. I know how intense you are. So you are definitely an intense individual. So that's not a problem. But how would you get a strength coach, you know, coming out, a young guy, or even a sports coach, to really get his team fired up, especially if they, you know, they're down. You know, they maybe lost a tough game, you know, the day before. You got to get them ready for the next game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting them to really, I mean, even, I'll tell you what, it isn't even necessarily like you have to sit down and tell a story. I always say this, relate something as a coach, relate something that you experienced, relate something, talk about adversity, talk about, you know, what, you know, maybe you found a coach that motivated you, dive deep into what your personal, and I'll say this, I keep saying stories, what motivated you. They're going to listen. There's no question about it. And by the time that they see that you're passionate, you're fired up about their success, it's not about us. It's not about my success or your success, Coach. It's about their success. And if you can tap into that emotionally, and you can say to them, "Hey, look, guys, the past is the past. You got to move forward now," and get something that really touches on them. I always say this. I'll tell you what, Dave, you know me, I'll say this to everybody. I am a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, have been all my life. Growing up in Philadelphia, grew up as a Steelers fan. But I got to experience that team when they were great in the 70s. And it's interesting, I read a thing about Chuck Noll, and Chuck Noll told his players, he said, you do know that you guys are not extraordinary people. He goes, what you've done, though, is you've done the ordinary things better than everybody else. That's what makes you great. That's the motivation. That's the thing that got them so psyched. And you're talking about 11 Hall of Famers who sat down and said, you know what, he's right. We're really not that as great as we thought we were, but we just do everything that's ordinary better than everybody else does. And if you can relate that to kids, like I tell that story all the time to motivate kids, to go in and motivate kids, to get them to understand, hey man, guys, if you just do more than anybody else is willing to do, like I'm a cliche guy, I love saying things. I know you do too. I love saying it. Man, it's lonely on the extra mile because no one's there. They're not going to do it. And that's when I tell those kids, that's the difference. And when you hear it directly, and when you hear it from a softball team that won U14s down in Texas, and the girls came back and I said, tell me what it was. Tell me what was better. And the one girl said, she goes, you know what, coach? She goes, we intimidated them before we even stepped onto the field of play by our attitude, by the way we did things. And that's the defining factor as a coach. You get kids to do that, and you motivate them in that way, and they're champions before they even walked on the field, no matter what their record was previously. And that's my advice to young coaches, guys. Go out, reach those kids on an emotional level. Like I said, I can motivate anybody. I'm going to motivate anybody to be better than they thought they were. And in turn, man, that makes me better. That just makes me better as I move along as a coach and learn so much more. So, man, that's where I'm coming from with this. And even Dave, I'll tell you, even stepping into that clinic and making those coaches come down on that surface and saying, look, guys, you got to do this because you got to go back to your houses and you got to teach these kids how to be passionate. That's what I'm about.
Coach, I can feel the passion through the screen, man. And I know other coaches can as well, man. Seriously, you get me motivated every time we talk. Honest, I'm not just saying that. You get me fired up every time we talk.
I feel the same way, Dave.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I think there's some people out there that were meant for this profession. I think this is the direction that you were meant to be. I really do. I think what you do with your athletes and how you present it even to other coaches, you know, I always learn something. And I try to tell every single coach I work with, if you can learn something, even if it's just one thing from another individual, then you made progress in your life. And, you know, yeah. I just don't learn one thing from you. I usually learn like 50 things from you, you know, because always give me something. So I greatly appreciate that. I know people on the other end that are going to watch this, they're going to learn tons of stuff from this and stuff. How, if they do have any questions, how can they reach out to you, you know, at least get in touch with you, find out, you know, hey, stop by and see if they're in the you know, this general vicinity, you know, they're in New Jersey, anywhere, or even if they want to fly in and see, how can they do that?
So I'm in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, suburb just outside of Philadelphia, about 25 miles, not terribly far away from you, Dave.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're fairly close, actually. They can contact me directly. And you know, if they need an email address, if they want a cell phone number, I'm very happy to give that out, and so that people can communicate with me at any time. And I'll say this: I don't care what profession, what part of the sport coaching world they're from. I welcome coaches to come in. It wouldn't matter to me if they came from another system. I want them to see and experience. Okay, well, like, how do we make each other better? That's what it ends up being. So I'm certainly available for people if they want to reach out and talk to me, and we can certainly arrange for something for all of us to get together.
Definitely.
For sure.
Definitely. Well, Coach, man, I appreciate it all the time you took this great evening and stuff like that. I know you're recovering, so I wish you the best here. I know you'll be back running probably within a week. I bet you a week. I'm giving it a week, man. I know the doctor probably says another 3 weeks. I'm giving it 1 week. I know you. And I know how fired you up to get back. But, you know, I wish you the best there. I appreciate you coming out, you know, and supporting this cause, you know, trying to educate the young strength coaches, the young coaches out there, and get people on the right path to gaining more knowledge, but also doing it the correct way. So thank you so much, Coach.
I appreciate it. Like I said, if there's a way that, you know, if people want to communicate to me, I don't know if they can reach out to you to get my information. I'm very happy to be, I'm here for people, because believe me, I'm going to learn just as much from them as they will from me. This is what it is. It's reciprocal.
Yeah.
And
yeah. What I'll do, Coach, is I will put everything, guys out there that are listening. I will have all Coach's information. I will have his email, you know, his Facebook, all that kind of stuff. You guys can reach directly out to him after you guys see this, And, definitely, I highly recommend it. Anybody I have on here over this summit, over these, all these presenters, reach out to them. That's the way you grow. That's the only way I grew. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm one of the most shy, introverted person out there.
What?
And I reached out to a bunch of guys. Coach Mitchell's one, and he brought me out of my shell. Made me say, "Hey, listen, you got to spread what you know, and then you're going to learn in turn." So definitely reach out. But I will put all that stuff out, Coach. Thank you once again. I appreciate it. You are the man.
You are.